Your favorite Grey Ghost friends are back. We've got Al and Cheryl here. And I'm going to see if we can get people checking in and get a mic check. Can everybody hear us okay?
Can anyone hear me?
So Paula Dickinson is checking in. Oh my goodness, we have Stacy Tiley, and we have already skyrocketed to 1,000 viewers.
Wow.
Unbelievable. So excited to have you guys back. I need somebody to check in. Yep, we got Karen Quaintance out there. She says the mic works. We are so happy to have you all back for season 3 sneak peeks with Happy Half Hour starring Al and Cheryl Keller. Okay, this is when you guys are supposed to be clapping. Excellent. We've got Paul and Warren, Wilson and Karen in, Stacy and Paula. We are so excited. And I got a little low. All right. Is this better?
Can you hear us now? If you cannot hear us, let us know.
Debbie loved the library tasting last week. So Paul, can you let me know how we're coming in? Can everybody hear us? We have 14,000 people on the edge of their seats right now. Yes, Virginia Wine Time says we are ready to roll. So Al, I will turn it over to you.
Are we on now? Are we on?
Yes, we're on now.
Okay. Well, welcome again to Happy Half Hour at Grey Ghost Winery. We're really excited about this. This is the March 2021 edition. Today it's going to be Cheryl, Amy, and of course me. We're broadcasting live today from Grey Ghost Studio 1W and CS. I'll let you all figure out what that means. We have a number of issues and topics that we want to cover today, and I know we've got a very limited time, so I thought it best that we just get started right off the bat. First, a little news, piece of information. We understand that due to the COVID-19, the government unions have renegotiated their contract. It was on TV when it was announced to the employees. From what we understand, based on the live television broadcast, a student or the union steward informed them that government salaries would double. There would be a 6-month paid vacation, and there would only be having to work on Fridays. At that time, someone in the back of the crowd yelled, "You mean every Friday?" Okay. With that, we'll move right on. Again, we want to tell you how much we appreciate all the support that you all have been giving us. This has been a very trying year, but it appears that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So we're really looking forward to that. Tonight, the featured wine is the 2020 Riesling. And I'm going to touch base a little bit about this before I pour our wines. The 2020 Riesling is the first of the 2020 vintage to come out. It was officially released today at the winery. It was cold fermented and stopped at about just under 0.5% residual sugar. So again, it's classified more of an off-dry Riesling. One of the things that Cheryl, Amy, and I picked up on is it has some lovely tropical fruit hints with some nice honeydew melon characteristics. Very crisp acidity, making it a delightful wine to go with your many lighter seafood dishes and lighter poultry dishes, not to mention just a great wine for sipping. So, with that, what I'd like to do now is toast the 2020 vintage with Cheryl and me. And here comes the fifth wheel. There we go. Well, Cheryl, here's to the Riesling 2020.
Karen says she misses us too.
Okay. Now, one of the things you'll probably note is that Cheryl is still using 2 glasses. Once again, for the sake of safety, we're going to adhere to this policy. The beauty of the 2000 glasses, let me flip back to my right page here, is that it does give us the ability to protect our hands and keep them away from our face. Now, we think that this is going to become a permanent change here at Grey Ghost. Why, you ask? Just because we can. So it encourages us to enjoy our wines twice as fast as normal. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the 2020 vintage, but I do want to point out at this point that the downside was the freeze, the upside is the quality. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. However, we cannot move on without some comments from Cheryl. A lot has happened since we've seen you last, and I really want to have Cheryl speak to a lot of the detail about the many highlights over the past year. So with that, Cheryl, would you go ahead and make your presentation? Wow. Wow. I can see that it was really a great year by her comments. For what it's worth, Cheryl, your comment and insight have been overwhelmingly received with both joy and enthusiasm by all those viewers who have responded. So thank you again so much for all your comments. Now, on with the presentation. We have 4 topics that we're going to be working with tonight. The first, of course, is going to be the 2020 growing season. The second is going to be what we've changed in the vineyard as a result of that. Then we're going to flip over to some fun things that the public have never experienced. One is the bottled wine storage area or warehouse, and then the other is where do we store Christmas. But let's first start with the growing season of 2020. And as I mentioned, I'm going to start with the negative. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the Mother's Day freeze. Truly a devastating freeze, did significant damage to our Chardonnay. Some of the other different types of varietals were less damaged, including the Vidal and Petit Verdot. The rest of the year was near perfect. We had just enough rain for the vineyards, lots of sun, plenty of warm weather, and of course very mild evenings. The result was harvest was actually a little bit later than normal, resulting in a longer growing season. The winter started off very mild, and then we got very cold. Again, a perfect introduction to going into 2021. All in all, 2020, I have to say, was an extraordinarily great year for grapes, although the production will be light. So when you're listening to people about the 2020, keep in mind, yes, the frost reduced our production, but it didn't damage the quality of the wine coming out of 2020. What I'm going to do as we go through these 4 panels is ask if there's any questions that anyone may have as a result of that, and Amy will keep me posted if she sees any. Nothing yet. Okay, now let's go to topic number 2, which is probably one of the most critical topics today that we're going to discuss. What we normally do in the vineyard is set up these massive burn piles throughout the vineyard, strategically placed, so if there's a weather forecast indicating a possible frost, these can be ignited and hopefully give us some type of an air inversion protecting the vines against frost. This year we had 2 rather scary moments. Day 1, at about 2 a.m. in the morning, I went out and checked the temperatures, and in the vineyard they were running at about 37 degrees with a slight breeze. We felt comfortable enough not to light the piles, and the following morning everything was okay. Then came Mother's Day, day 2. Again at 2 a.m. in the morning, I went out and checked the vineyards, and the temperatures were running at 34 degrees with no breeze. This is a dangerous moment. We had notified the Sheriff's Department here in Rappahannock County that if this occurred, we would be lighting some bonfires in the middle of the night. So we told them, whatever you do, don't send the fire department, because we don't want these things put out. By 2:45 in the morning, all the fires were burning. These piles were large enough that they actually caused what we call fire tornadoes over each of them. Truly looked like a war site or a war zone. These fires were significant enough that it protected our Gewürztraminer, Petit Verdot, some of the Cab, and some of the Cabernet Franc. The Vidal had not pushed far enough out, so it was also protected, and we had little or no damage in that category. However, we were not able to save the Chardonnay. We've virtually lost everything. Chardonnay shoots at this stage are extraordinarily delicate, and by the following day, the shoots had turned black, indicating that the frost had done its damage. Now, what are we doing to adjust to this in 2021? The burn piles are still set up. They're as big as ever, again, strategically placed. But now we're adjusting our pruning. And what we want to do for you all today is demonstrate a little bit about what a significant change this really represents. So with that, Cheryl and I are now going to do a pruning of a particular vine right here in the studio. The vine that you see in front of you is an old vine that has been pulled up and is actually being replaced. We're replanting that section. So what I'm going to have Cheryl do is prune the first section or the first spur the way we would normally prune. Now, what you're looking at is basically the trunk would be coming up here. You're looking at a cordon. Each of these areas are classified spurs, and each of these are now canes. When they first break and they're green, they're shoots, but now they're mature, so they're canes. So what Cheryl is going to do is prune the first spur the way we normally would prune. Now, as you're looking at this, if you note, Cheryl left 2 buds on this particular spur. One is right here. Let me see if I can get a pointer here. One is right here, and the other one is at the base. So these 2 would now be the producing buds for this particular spur, and that's where we would end up getting our fruit.
Point those 2 buds out one more time.
This is one, and this is the second one down here. Now what she's going to do is prune this spur with the method that we're doing this year. If I can get this out of our way, we'll take a quick peek. As you notice, she completely cut off this cane and left this one, the new spur, with as many as 6 buds all the way up. The reason we're doing that is a vine has what they call apical dominance, which means that as it starts to warm up, the bud furthest from the trunk is going to be the first bud to break. Once we start to move into spring, we have up to 6 opportunities of bringing that particular spur back to 2 buds, which ultimately will happen. If for any reason early on these buds begin to swell, we're going to be able to come back, and What Cheryl will do now is do a first return prune. So she's going to cut right here. Once again, you've noticed we've lost 2 buds, but we still have 4 buds left on this particular spur. That gives us one more opportunity, possibly 2, by reopening the wound. This spur is now going to begin to bleed, which means it's pushing moisture up, which is going to slow the next 2 buds from breaking too early. Now we go to the final pruning, at which time she's going to prune down to the final 2 buds. Now you notice we're back to where we would have started. We have 2 buds. Each of these buds now have the chance of breaking and producing the fruit that we need on this particular vine. The whole concept here is to delay bud break as much as possible so we can avoid what transpired in 2020. As you can see, this is definitely going to become a labor-intensive a trial for us, since we've now got about 4 or 5 acres of vines that have to be repruned at least once, possibly twice. But if we can avoid a 2020 disaster, I think it's going to be well worth it. So we really wanted you all to see this so that you can basically understand what's transpiring in the vineyard and how we're doing our best to modify it. Okay, now I'm going to put this guy down. Now, regrettably, that's not the only problem we're going to be facing this year. Another problem that we have is we're due for the 17-year cicadas, which can be devastating to a vineyard. And we've put together a little bit of a diagram so you can see what potential damage this can take place. When a shoot begins to grow, you have a spur here, and this is the way the shoot is growing. And you'll notice there's little clusters here, and what we tried to do is give a little bit of an indication of where the fruit would be. Late May is when they expect the cicadas to hit. And what a cicada female does is she lays her eggs in green tissue by splitting it open and then laying her eggs. There's 2 locations that she could possibly lay her eggs in. In A, you notice she laid it above the fruit zone. So anything above where she's laid her eggs is ultimately going to die. And what happens is the vine does not want to give up. So it will immediately begin to shoot up 2nd and 3rd shoots coming off the areas right around the leaves, which now makes us a little bush. But if you look real carefully, because she laid her eggs above the fruit zone, we still have fruit on that vine. If she lays her eggs where B is located, that's now below the fruit zone, which means everything above that is going to end up dying. And what we'll end up seeing is, again, a bushy vine with little or no fruit. So you can see why this has got a lot of us concerned, why Cheryl and I are really concerned. We went through this 17 years ago. When these cicadas hit, they're massive. And for those of you who have experienced it, they're also very noisy. And that's one of the things that Cheryl pointed out to me today to be sure to mention. Now I'm going to go one other diagram here. But before I do that, we're going to take a look at a cane. And this cane was pruned off of a vine. If these are the 2 buds that we want to hang on to, if the cicadas lay their eggs anywhere along what's now going to be a green shoot, anything above that will die. If she lays her eggs close to or near where the fruit zone is, we end up losing the fruit. To give you some indication of what I'm talking about, this would be a close-up of a shoot. The female actually makes a series of slits, and inside each of these slits will be an egg. And this is what causes the death of the segment above the wound. And where I've put the little red dots are about where the vine would die. Keep in mind, all of this is soft green tissue, so it's very easy for her to get into. It's not the brown cane that you were looking at a moment ago. So these are the two issues that Cheryl and I are facing right now with regards to the vineyard. We're hoping that the pruning system is going to help us manage it. At the same time, we've got our fingers crossed that we're not facing any severe problems. Yes, do we have a question?
Yes, we're hearing from Diane Andrews, who asked, is that pruning only going to be on the Chardonnay?
Diane, yes. Everything else has been pruned in a normal fashion. We feel very comfortable with the Cabernet and the Vidal, since both of those are very late bud break, and both of those survived relatively well on the 2020. And we had the burn piles on the other areas where the Gewürztraminer, Petit Verdot, and Cab Franc were, so I'm comfortable there. So Chardonnay, since it was so drastically damaged, that's why that's the only area that's being pruned as it is.
Stacy Tiley asked, how do you know where the cicada lays her eggs and how soon after the dirty deed?
The cicada wound is very visible, Stacy. It's not something that's hidden, and once the eggs are laid, you begin to see the browning on the top, above the shoot, above the wound. I don't know if you all remember, but they really like oak trees as well. And when the oaks were hit, the tips of the new shoots died, and you saw them hanging on the edge of the tree. That's basically what we see in the vineyard with regards to the vines.
So, Karen, I'm going to come back to your question in a second, but let me do Paula's next. Paula said, doesn't it also cause animal pressure because acorns die? So basically, are we going to look at more of a problem there?
Yes, and we also have another problem too. Cicadas are very tasty to birds. And what tends to happen is the bird population actually skyrockets, which means that we now face more bird damage as the fruit begins to ripen. So you're right, it's a snowball effect causing significant agricultural damage. And if we can't control the cicadas, and one of the ways of controlling it is to use a spray very similar to what we use for Japanese beetles. The problem is the cicada population escalates so rapidly that it's almost impossible to control it.
So that you actually ended up answering Karen Quaintance's question, which was, is there anything that can be done to stop the cicadas?
Yes and no, and quite frankly, we will try. We'll try to keep the population under control, but if it's anything like we faced 17 years ago, it's going to be a real challenge. Any other questions?
Looks like we're good right now.
Okay. Well, now we get to go into something that's a little more fun, and that's talking a little bit about the warehouse and also Christmas. So let's start with the warehouse. You're actually inside the Grey Ghost wine warehouse where we store our bottled wine. This is one of the first times we've ever allowed the public in to actually see what's going on. As you're well aware, when we do our bottling, we do it in the tank room. Once the wine is in the bottle, it's moved to this room, which is maintained at a constant 56 degrees. You probably noticed that Cheryl and I are both in jackets right now. 56 degrees is actually rather cool. When the wine comes into the warehouse, it's stored upright, corks up. This allows the wine bottles to effectively neutralize the pressure, stabilize, and therefore avoid any possibilities of leakers coming out of from the bottles. After about 2 weeks, all of these bottles are flipped cork down. Now begins the storage. As long as the corks are wet, we won't have to worry about leakers from that point on. The only time the wine is moved from this room is when it goes to one of two places. First, our tasting room, and secondly, to Amy when she does her wholesale sales both to retail shops and to restaurants. That is it. Basically what you're viewing right now is a bonded facility. That means that all the wine in this room has not had the excise tax paid. For that reason, this has to be highly secured under government regulation. That's why you've never had the opportunity of actually coming into this room. Once it's moved out of this room, taxes are paid. The government gets their money, and now we can sell the wine to the consumer. One of the things you probably will note is there was a partition toward the back of the room where it's actually a screen.
They have not gotten much of a tour yet, Al.
Okay.
So shall I pan a little bit?
Pan a little bit. Toward the back, you're going to see a partition where there's something hidden behind it. That's actually the 2023 cork construction underway. You're actually seeing it for the first time and probably won't have the foggiest idea what's actually going on. To give you some idea of just the incredible temperature and climate control that we have back here, one of the other things we store back here is wedding dresses. Amy is panning in right now on both Cheryl's wedding dress, her mom's, and my mom's. All of these have been restored and packaged and are now being stored in this room as a way of preserving them for as long as we possibly can. So we're really excited about this. This is a very unusual opportunity to get to see it. And if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Okay, so I was afraid of this, and Stacy, thank you for the feedback. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do a quick pan. Everybody look closely at that screen, because when I was shifting around, they were not able to hear you. So we're going to reset.
Okay, and I can walk with you.
Okay, yes. We'll have Al walk with us. Thank you for keeping us honest, guys. We love that. Oh, this is going to get fun. Okay, Al. So we're walking now.
What we're actually seeing now is the wine stored. You're also seeing a number of empty cases. These are moved into the tank room when we do our bottling. Anything that carries labels indicate that the wine is already bottled and being stored. Directly behind this screen is the 2023 display. And I'm hoping you're able to see it. I think it's just incredible that you're actually getting to witness this before it's completed.
That is the 2023 Christmas display, correct?
That's correct. And if you have any problems seeing it, be sure you let me know. Okay, I think we've all had an opportunity to view it. Then
now,
what we're going to do...
Tell them quickly about, because I think this is so interesting. Can you just re-talk about the flipping of the bottles? I think that's a pretty interesting thing to...
When we bring the wine back here, it's newly bottled, and these wines are not stable when they're first bottled. So what we want to do is make sure the atmospheric pressure in the bottle equals the atmospheric pressure outside the bottle. So by leaving the wine cork up, it does give that wine the ability to neutralize itself. If you turn that bottle over and there's pressure on the inside of the bottle, it will force the wine somewhere, and oftentimes that's when you end up with leakers. After about a 2-week period of time, the wine is stabilized, and now all of these bottles are flipped upside down to allow the cork now to become wet, and now you have a perfect seal on that bottle.
Excellent. So now,
And now the other thing we talked about was,
but I'm sorry, because this is a very timely question. What does not stable mean?
not stable means it's not, the pressure within the bottle is different from the atmospheric pressure outside the bottle. The wine itself is ready. And also keep in mind, when a bottling is done, especially on reds, we've roughed that wine up. So you want that wine to actually come back to a stable position where you are going to get a very good consistency in the product. And that's basically what we're looking for with regards to stability.
Thank you, Barbara Allen, for that question. And now, why is this, go ahead.
And this, of course, this room is so perfectly stable with regards to temperature and climate control. It's almost like a Smithsonian museum where items that have great value are also stored. And what you're actually looking at are the cases where we have Cheryl's wedding dress, Cheryl's mother's wedding dress, and my mother's wedding dress, not mine, but my mother's wedding dress, all stored in this building, in this room, which is under a perfect climate control and therefore are preserved, we hope, for basically forever.
Al, we've had some amazing questions pouring in. Would you like to take your seat and we'll ask a few more of these questions before our next segment?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Oh my gosh, these crazy kids. So let's start with Chris and Sally Christopher. Any percentage of loss between upright and flip?
No, there is no loss whatsoever.
Now, I will tell you, we have some very astute viewers today, because when you were standing in front of the screen, our friends at Virginia Wine Time, Paul and Warren, and also Karen Quaintance, are questioning, are 2021 and 2022 already done?
Funny you should ask. When we go to segment number 4, you're actually going to get to see the 2021 and 2022 covered up so you can't see them.
So I would be delighted to answer Karen Quaintance and Jane Hunt, who asked where my wedding dress is. It's in a closet in one of those boxes at my house, but now that I see this wonderful storage opportunity, we might be moving it over here. To which Chris and Sally would like to bring over Sally's wedding dress. And Larry notices how much Cheryl's been laughing at all this good stuff. Stacy wants to know, do you have boxing gloves for roughing up the wine?
Have another drink.
You can tell we haven't seen everybody since the Christmas special. Y'all are fabulous.
Some of these questions I would have to actually think about. I think it's time for another drink. Okay. It's been a long time since we've had a drink. It's been almost 15 minutes. Okay. We're ready to go to the last phase of today's program, and we're finally talking Christmas. Two of the most common questions we have at Christmas is, number one, who makes these things? And number two, where do you store them after Christmas? To answer your first question, yours truly. It keeps me out of Cheryl's hair, and one of the reasons we're rapidly approaching 50 years of marriage. So I think it's become a dual benefit. Sure. Notice how quickly Cheryl was willing to toast that comment. Secondly, where do we store them? I think now it's time to go into the segment of this building where these displays are actually stored. segment where Christmas is stored each year. And you'll probably recognize a number of the items on display, like for example the airplane which is hanging from the ceiling. Normally you would have seen the hot air balloon in the tank room. It's stored here, actually hung up. In the back you can see the nutcracker without its head. Once again, there's a number of items, like the latest one was the little red pickup truck with a tree. A couple of items that you can't see, for example, the 2022 display, which right now is undercover. And over here we have the 2021 located in a box. Although not very large, I think it's going to be impressive when it comes out. The other thing that we have back here is not only cork displays, but the things that are associated with the corks. Yes.
Before we discuss those, would you like to show them where the grand Christmas tree is stored?
Ah, very good question. Yes, the tree that stands 11 feet tall is right here next to me. And you notice it sandwiches into a place that's very, very small and can easily be stored. Directly above it is the Santa's sleigh and reindeer, again all compacted. So the whole idea is to be able to store these in a very reduced area. Directly behind the wall is where the Santa's chair is stored. That's actually a closet back there that leads up to a stairwell up to the offices. And again, a number of the decorations are stored back there.
And Paula, I'm looking for the nutcracker head right now. Let's see here. Oh, there it is, right there on the floor. Can you see that? There's the nutcracker head. There's our nutcracker. Which, that was pretty funny because we have to take the nutcracker head off in order to get it into the other building. As you were, Al.
Now the other thing too, there are 2 pallets over here that contain all of the ornaments and decorations that are associated with Christmas. And of course all of the poinsettias above that are stored in individual boxes. There's 2 other items that are back here that are of interest. One is if you look over on the far right, you're going to see 8 bins, green bins, fiberglass. These are the bins that we use during the harvest to ferment small lot red grapes, each holding about a ton of grapes. So the segment you see over there represents about 8 tons of grapes that we can ferment in small lots. We have an additional 4 bins that are on the crush pad, even as we speak, giving us about another, each of those hold about 1.5 tons, so that gives me about another 6 tons of grapes. Yes.
So I suspect I know what you're going to address next, Al, and we already have viewers. You guys are incredible. Barbara Allen, Larry Pryluck, they have all noticed something very interesting in the back.
That's the other item we wanted to talk about. What you're seeing over there is the
Hammond B3.
Hang on 1 second. Cheryl, we want to make sure all the viewers can hear that. What is that we're seeing in the back?
That's the famous Hammond B3 organ.
For what it's worth, Cheryl is very modest. She's a very accomplished organist. She plays, I think, a total of 6 different instruments, including the violin. She played with the violin in the Springfield Symphony Orchestra when she was living in Springfield as a high school student. She's self-taught on the organ and has played in being the organist in 3 different churches that we've been a member of. The B3 organ is probably one of the most famous of all of the organs used by many of the what you'd call, I guess, small bands. And I will have to admit she's quite an organist. The sound system, which is directly next to it,
And why don't you guys, if you want to step in front of it, and that way they can be looking out while you're talking about it and be able to hear you. There we go.
Show the speaker,
which you see off to the side, is actually more valuable than the organ itself. This is what gives the organ its incredible vibrato, sound system, just an incredible piece of instrument. And these are all, Cheryl, you can help me on this one, but it's just a very unique piece of instrument, something that's...
It's not made today. If you can find one of these, more power to you.
It's a very treasured piece.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't know it, you're dealing with an individual who was quite a musician. She still is. But I think what we'll probably do is forego her playing just tonight. Any questions at all?
No, Leslie speakers, did you say? On this, I've had a couple comments on Leslie speakers.
Basically, it's the B3 that, I don't know what else.
It's the speaker that actually goes directly with the instrument.
Right.
If you were to look in it, in the back of it, it's multiple speakers that give you your bass, your treble, but also give you the vibrato of an organ. So basically it's duplicating a pipe organ with that speaker, and that's what makes this speaker so unique.
So Carol's asking, does the cooler temperature in that room, is that not a problem for the organ?
Since it's so dry back here and so low humidity, I think it actually preserves this piece of this instrument.
I like Karen's idea of putting it up in the tasting room.
So do I, Karen. So do I.
Stacy Tiley asked, in what year do you run out of storage room?
I'll keep you posted, Stacy. Right now I'm in pretty good shape. Well, let's head back to the warehouse now and handle any additional questions that you may have with regards to this particular session.
I think I spy another fun thing to show the group, and that's up here.
What Amy is showing you, I'm sure you're all familiar with our wine glass collection. Anytime we collect a glass, we always purchase a second one just to protect us in case one breaks. So what you're seeing is a complete duplicate set of the glasses that you see in the tasting room. And of course, you'll notice the yellow tags on them. Each box is labeled so we're able to identify what wine glasses are in what boxes.
So exciting.
Okay, we're on our way back out. Okay, I guess now it's time for our closure here. And what we wanted to do is, before we close, pass on one little bit of a story that was kind of intriguing. A little boy was going to bed one night, and during the course of the evening, a terrible thunderstorm rolled in. And of course, the thunder was just more than he could take. So he jumped out of bed, ran into his mom and dad's room, and jumped in bed with them. His dad said, "Son, what are you afraid of?" And he says, "Well, it's the thunder, Dad." And his dad said, "Don't worry about that. What God is doing is anytime he hears a lie, he has thunder as a way of reminding people that there's a lie." The little boy said, "But Dad, why would the thunder be so late at night?" And he said, "Well, the only thing I can think of is this is about the time they start printing the newspaper." So with that, once again, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're hoping to keep this up on a monthly basis, but we're not going to be able to identify specific dates since a lot depends on what's going on. But again, you all have been wonderful supporters. We really love you much. We can't wait to get you back. And like always, we'll have the receipt books waiting. Thank you again.
Thank you for joining us. for our first episode of season 3, Happy Half Hour, episode 1 sneak peeks. We will look forward to seeing you all in April.